Ooh, I'm excited for this one, and as you can tell, it's a little bit different. The other day I got a call from a friend of mine, an extraordinarily talented photographer named Jon Duncan, here in Middle Tennessee. He was shooting a music video for a small band out of Nashville and asked me if I wanted to come take some behind the scenes photos and video. And I said, absolutely, of course. And man, it was a good time. Jon is an absolute professional, super talented. I will attempt to link his social media in here. If not, it'll be in the description. But give him a like, give him a follow on Instagram. Totally worth the follow. Dude's amazing. But he had me come out, shoot some behind the scenes stuff. And when I dumped these into Lightroom, I absolutely fell in love with these images. So what I want to do today is go through my editing process and how I edited these images to get a consistent feel across the entire series. So without further ado, let's start that out. All right, so this is my editing process. This is the image that we are going to be working on. As you can see, it's very hazy, very warm. The lights were extremely warm, the studio lighting in there. But this is the image we're gonna start with, and I'm gonna show you my editing process to get to a final image that you saw a few of in the intro. So, first thing I do when I look at a photo, especially if I'm doing a series, is I kind of figure out a vision for where I wanna go. So in this case, I want to keep that warm feel, that studio, kind of gritty, country folk rock feel. And the next thing I want to do is straighten the image, right? So one of the things you can do as a photographer is make sure in camera your images are straight. This is pretty close. Sometimes when you're running a gun, it's just not feasible, so you get to do that in Lightroom. So the first thing we're going to do is go up here to this crop tool, and I'm going to find a vertical line somewhere in my image, right? A line that I know is vertical, straight up and down, a corner of a building, a windowsill. In this case, I have this really nice light stand right here that I'm going to just align this guy to make sure that this image is straight. So that's looking pretty close. So the next thing I want to look at is composition. I'm still staying in the crop and adjustment tool here, and I'm going to look at kind of what my image looks like in this lighter area. So immediately what I notice is this dark area here, the sandbags that are the counterweights for this light boom, and even the key light up here are just a little off balance, and they're going to take away from the image if I don't get rid of those. Occasionally, actually quite often, you hear photographers say, oh, I never crop. If you need to crop, crop. You're going to get better images and a better product overall. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep in mind, I want to kind of keep my artists here, their shoulders, I want to be at the edge of the frame equidistant from each other. So the same distance between this guy's shoulder and the edge, and the same distance between this girl and the edge. So I'm gonna bring that in. The other thing I want to think about is what my focal point is, right? So this is Jon right here providing direction to his artists, and I want to keep him on that 2/3 line. Now, as you can see, Lightroom builds in the 2/3 guides. So I'm gonna put his head right on that top 2/3 line to adhere to that compositional rule of thirds. And I'm just going to continue to bring this in until I'm happy with the composition. Make sure this light isn't in here, so I'm going to bring that down a little bit more. Now that gives me the freedom to bring this up. I like that this light stand is here because it does give kind of a foreground element, and but it's not a key piece, but it gives you some depth. So the lights in the background are your far depth, and then your foreground element is the light stand here, and that creates a really good composition. All right, so I'm happy with that. Got the shoulders about the same distance. I think that's where we want to start editing this picture. All right, we're going to hit our enter key and we're going to start the edit. So the first thing we're going to start with is light. Obviously this is very washed out, it's very hazy, so we want to bring back some of the details, particularly in the artists, but we want to kind of try to crush out the background to bring those subjects so it gives you an even better sense of depth. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with exposure. Now this is exposed a little high, so we're going to bring this down. You can already see what a difference that's making. And I think a little, probably -1.2, right about there. And then contrast I'm going to bring up. And what you'll see is with contrast is it brings saturation up too. And so it's turning that yellowish haze, that light orange, into a deeper orange. And we want to kind of dial that back a little bit here in a minute. But let's go through the light stuff first. So highlights we want to bring down. So if you notice what highlights do is they crush out light halos around light sources. So if I bring these all the way up, you can see the lights over here creates a huge halo. And if I bring them down, you get the detail back in the lights. Now, I want some detail in the lights, but I also want a little bit of spill. So I'm thinking right about there is right, we're about -38 where we want to be with that. Shadows I'm not going to touch yet. We may mess with that a little bit because it will help bring out some of the detail in the darker parts of the image. But I definitely want to bring down the white light because that's going to affect the brightness of all of the pixels on the image. And then I want to crush out the blacks to create that contrast. All right, I'm happy with that, but the image to me is a little bit warm. So I'm going to dial the temperature back here to, let's start with 4800. It's probably not quite far enough. Let's do 4500. That's probably about where I want to start. And I'm going to bring down vibrance just a touch and saturation just a touch because that will help us with that gritty feel and help that orange not be so overpowering. All right, I'm going to go back up here to the point curve. Now I hear a lot of talk about the S curve. When people talk about S curve and tone, it's this tool that they're talking about. And the way I do this is, so you see there's no curves at all. You can get pretty good results just in the contrast curve, which is this first one with the gray dot in Lightroom. And the way I do this is I'm going to do an S curve on every single one of these channels. And the way I do that is to a point in the middle, a point up here on this, where this line intersects, and a point down here where this line intersects. And what an S curve means is it makes an S. And you'll see that right now. We're going to bring that down a little bit, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And already you see the contrast. We got a lot more contrast in the image there. Another thing that I like to do, especially for like a grittier image, is I'm just going to pull this tail up just a little bit. And what that does, we'll bring it up further. See how it brings those deep blacks into a gray? We don't want it to go quite that far, but just a little bit. And what that'll help you do is, again, create that kind of aged, gritty look, but it'll pull out your subjects that are standing in darkness. And then I'm going to apply S curves to the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. You see that's kind of starting to look funky, but once we do all of these, the composition will come together. Oop, lost my control point. There we go. And blue channel. And again, I'm not going crazy with this. You can go crazy with some images, but I don't want to go too crazy. I don't want to go too off the deep end here. So it's just a subtle S curve on all the channels. That might even be a little too much to the yellow. Yeah, let's not make that too yellow. Let's put that right about there. Okay, I am happy with that. I do want to actually now bring the saturation down a little bit more just because that brought back a lot of that yellow. Okay. Color Mixer is one of those advanced features that lets you fine-tune the color balance in all of your primary color channels. We're not going to worry too much about green, teal, blue, purple, and magenta here. This image is very red, orange, yellow. So we're going to, really it's orange, yellow. So we're going to tweak the orange, yellow channels here and see if we can't make this a little bit better. So in my orange channel, if I go red, you can see it turns the whole composition red. I don't really want to do that. Maybe a little bit red, because this area through here is more of your yellow color. So we're going to mess with that a whole lot. But I want to just kind of tie this to the red, just because it'll help give me a little warmer of an outline, and then I'm going to cool off this center and bring it closer to natural color. Let's see. Keep those shadows dark. There we go. All right, my yellow channel, I'm going to pull back closer to the orange, and you'll see that helps blend that red that we added in this upper and lower section. Bringing the yellow to the orange is going to help blend with that. But we are going to pull a little bit of color out of it, again, to keep that kind of aged gritty looking image. And luminance is fine, we like it right there. The next thing we're gonna do is work on texture, clarity, dehaze, and vignette, your effects panel. So texture is gonna bring out texture in clothing, skin, hair, musical instruments. And what it really does that I like here is, well, you'll see when I move this, all this little detail here in these clouds is gonna come out. You can see how much detail I've already pulled out. Now you want to be careful with the texture tool in portraits and things like that because it makes every pore visible, it makes every wrinkle visible. So typically if I'm working portraits, I'll actually bring the texture down a little bit to soften that skin. But here we're okay because the image, we want it to look gritty. I'm going to bring the clarity up just a tad. And what clarity does is it increases contrast while pulling saturation out of the image. So again, it creates a little bit more gritty of an image. A dehaze, this was a very hazy room. So dehaze, you can actually pull haze out of a room or add it. So you'll see what I do when this slides. It almost tries to cut through the clouds by adding contrast. Or you can go the other way and add even more smoke to the room. The room was smoky enough, we may just right about, let's do like just a real subtle on that. And the last thing I want to do here, well, two more things I want to do here are vignette. So I want to add a vignette that creates that shadows in the corners of the image and then pulls the viewer's eye into the center of the frame. And then I want to, for that gritty feel, add some grain. So probably about 29, 30 in grain. And that's a pretty good image. So we've come a long way from the initial image. Let me show you the original. There's the original. Hazy, decent composition, but still not something that is usable. And now you can see we've got a very dramatic, almost Christopher Nolan Batman looking image here that creates a lot of depth, a lot of atmosphere, and I'm happy with this image now. So this is kind of the theme I want to go with for the entire series of these images, is that smoky country bar, folksy music, acoustic guitar, good time having place. So thanks for stopping in and hanging out. That was the first iteration of editing a series of Lightroom photos, hopefully the first of many. Thank you again to Jon Duncan for giving me the opportunity to come and shoot some cool behind the scenes photos. And that's it for now. We will see you in the next one.